Hey everybody, my name's Arjun Narang. I'm a product manager on the AppDefense team, and just want to spend some time talking to you guys about AppDefense and how it fits in with vSphere Platinum to give you all that data center endpoint security. So I want to start. I know you've seen some version of these slides already, but just want to frame the conversation for how we see AppDefense fitting into the market and what we see with other cybersecurity controls out there. So if we look at the types of cybersecurity software that are available today in the market, you can break them down into two categories, either reactive or preventive. And you'll hear me refer to reactive as chasing bad or firefighting also, and preventive as ensuring good or fire prevention. So with reactive solutions, you'll have things like antivirus and others where, again, using that firefighting analogy, where it's that the bad has already happened, right? The fire has already broken out. You need to go and send the fire trucks to put out that fire. With preventive, we're talking more about ensuring good, making sure that that bad event does not happen in the first place. So again, with the firefighting analogy, we're looking at using flame retardant materials, making sure that your buildings are up to code, so that you're ensuring that good behavior and not allowing the bad thing to get in the first place. So again, I think Bob mentioned patching several times. So patching is one of those, app control and others. So when we look at these reactive and preventive solutions, how are they being implemented? Where is the innovation going? Where is the investment from IT coming? It's primarily on the reactive side, right? You walk the floors of like a security conference like RSA a few weeks back, and you'll hear a lot of people talking about threat detection software, right? You won't hear as much on the preventative side. But if we look at what has the biggest impact, right? Is it the it's going to be more on the preventive side, right? The patching, the segmentation, and those things. And again, using the firefighting analogy, it's all about that preventing that, ensuring the good, preventing the bad from happening. So kind of one other, again, metaphor or analogy to put this into scope is about if you look at when it's coming to flu season, right? Do people tell you, hey, go ahead, get sick, and go to the doctor and get your antibiotics? They're not going to really give you that advice, right? They're going to say, hey, go get your flu shot, get your vaccination, which I know may be a sensitive subject right now for vaccination. But they're going to tell you about vaccinations. They're going to tell you, wash your hands, cover your mouth when you cough, all these kind of preventative measures, right, to prevent that bad from ever happening. And so it's not just me up here talking about this or VMware saying that preventive is better, but it's also Gartner, right, our favorite analyst, saying within this pyramid of cybersecurity controls for server workloads, the foundational strategies, the core strategies are all around preventive, right? Firewalling, application control, and the kind of more optional, less important, less critical protection strategies would be preventive, like anti-malware scanning. Now, just to be clear, this is not to say that those aren't necessary, right? There are definitely use cases and environments where you want your antivirus, right? If you're dealing with end users where the behavior is very unpredictable, you're not necessarily going to be able to enforce an application control or a very specific firewalling policy on those. But here today we're talking more about server workloads, which are well-defined, have sets of known good behaviors, and that's where a lot of these preventive technologies and security softwares really come into play. So that's all great for setting up the conversation. Now let's talk a little bit more about AppDefense. So first, I want to start with, how do we deploy, what is AppDefense, right? So it's a security product that's built into the virtualization layer. And this is one, key differentiator that we like to talk about, kind of having this, the integration into VM tools to be packaged as a module within VM tools and have that automatic installation, ease of deployment. And then also, even equally importantly is having a module that is a VIB within ESXi. And I already forgot what the actual definition of VIB is that Bob just mentioned 10 minutes ago. But having that VIB that's built into the kernel and is again deployed with ESXi, so that you're able to have these two zones of protection where within ESXi we're monitoring also our module within VM tools to know if that module has been attacked, has been corrupted, also to check on the kernel integrity, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into this. But again, having those two zones where we're built into the vSphere platform, is really able to differentiate the solution relative to others. And again, if you think about this, there's really only 4 vendors that could do this, and 3 of them are on the public cloud with Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, being able to integrate into the virtualization layer itself. And on-prem, it's pretty much just us at VMware.
So what does AppDefense do when VMware tools can't be installed for a number of reasons?
Right, so we do have like a separate module, especially with Linux installations. You can install that module by itself.
No, I mean, you can't install any other modules. It comes as an appliance. If you install something, you void the warranty.
Oh, I see. Well, in that,
It's an operating system you don't support.
Right. In that case, again, we're not going to be able to protect everything.
But will the underlying VIB do anything? Give us any benefit?
If there's no agent on, or if there's no VM tools?
Correct.
No. It will only, you need the VM tools on the guest OS, you need the ESX agent and everything else that goes into this.
You wouldn't be able to tell excessive CPU usage?
Today, no, we don't have that built in. We require that you have both. It could be something we look at in the future, but yeah, today we don't have that.
I would like to see that because there are cases where, for large organizations, where we have to install certain things that we just can't add to for whatever reason.
Makes sense, yeah.
And if we had something within the hypervisor that would determine abnormal memory access, network access, or even CPU utilization, that would be very nice to report upon.
Makes sense. No, appreciate the feedback, yeah. Okay, so when it comes to, implement, can you guys see? Am I blocking from the slide? Right. So when it comes to implementing AppDefense and, how does it actually work, we have 2 key phases that we like to talk about, right? One is discovery or learning mode, and the other is the protect and lockdown mode. So in discovery, we're going to be kind of listening to all of your behaviors, understanding what's going on in the data center, building this list of kind of known good application behaviors, what processes and what network connections are they making. And then when we shift into protect mode, we'll say that, okay, we've locked down this set of known good behaviors, and we'll look for any deviations from that set of known good. And the key here when we talk about protect is not just locking down, just that specific set of known good, because your data center is always evolving, you're upgrading software, you're changing IP schemas. So you have to be able to adapt within this protect phase. And that's going to be a key that I'll talk about again as we dive a little bit more into each of these 2 phases, the ability to keep up to date with the changes that are going on in your data center.
Does AppDefense detect potential escape the VMs?
Sorry, potential?
Escape the VM approaches, because there's been a bunch of them that have recently come out.
Okay.
And can AppDefense actually detect that those vectors are in use?
Sorry, can you give me a bit more detail on the escape the VM type?
The latest one was VMXNet.
Okay, so I guess I'm not as familiar with what exactly is the attack vector, or what do they do?
It attacked the VMXNet itself, the device on the
the VMX. So yeah, so in that sense, we do have the position within ESXi to monitor some of those drivers on the guest OS itself, and we should be able to detect that with the guest integrity checks that we do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so during the discover phase, we'll build out the VM inventory across your vCenter, tell you what VMs we see, and we'll use some integrations with deployment tools like Puppet, Chef, and vRealize automation to kind of build out this blueprint of how are all your VMs talking to each other, give you kind of a topology mapping, which I'll show you during the demo, of all the applications we see, all the virtual machines, and how they're communicating with each other. And within AppDefense, we use terminology called scopes for your applications, services, which would be things like a DB server or a web server, and those services consist of a homogeneous set of virtual machines, which again we call members, all acting as that DB server or whatever else. And so we'll define those roles for you, help you to put your VMs into the appropriate buckets. And then we'll go ahead and, in discovery mode, we'll start to listen and learn the known behaviors that are happening. So we'll be monitoring, using both that agent within, or the module within VM tools and within the ESX kernel to see what behaviors we're seeing, what processes are executing, what network behaviors, what network connections they're making. And we'll send that data to our app verification cloud. And again, this should, to be clear, is just metadata. We're not sending any, process data. But things like the IP addresses and the hashes. So here, when you're kind of looking at discovery mode and you're making the decision when you want to go into protected mode, we'll first give you kind of a burn down chart of how many new behaviors we've seen. So when you first put us into discovery mode, you'll see maybe 60 behaviors, right? And over time, that'll continue to drop down. And then when you reach a state where you think, okay, it seems like there's no new behaviors, we'll present you with some information to let you verify whether the behavior that's been detected during discovery mode is actually the known good. And so we'll use a few different components here that I want to spend some time talking about. So the first in that verification cloud is all around process reputation. So we'll be using feeds for risk score and threat score, for risk score and threat score. And then we'll also be using our own developed social assurance model, which is like a distributed consensus. So that's going to look at a process hash within your data center, within your environment, and see, okay, how often do we see that process hash? Do we see it elsewhere within your environment? And have you already kind of classified it as a known good? Because if so, we can probably say that, okay, this is also a known good for that other scope, that other application. Then, if we don't, whether or not we see it in your org, we'll also look across other deployments, right? Other VMware deployments with AppDefense, so large number of VMware customers there. And we'll check across their organizations, their deployments to see, okay, do they have this hash running? Is it a known good hash in their environment? And help to tell you, okay, what's the reputation of that process? And then the next thing we'll do is this guest integrity, right, which I talked a little bit about with that position in the ESX server. To kind of monitor, one is to monitor the AppDefense module itself to let you know if that has been compromised, right? Because when an attacker gets in, they'll disable your antivirus, or they'll try and disable AppDefense. So we'll let you know if that's been compromised. We'll do checks on the kernel OS, the kernel of the guest OS. We'll also do checks on whether the policy and the behaviors that are being reported by the module within VM tools match up with what with our module in ESXi is reporting also, and let you know if there's any discrepancies there. And then the other one we'll do is, I skipped a little bit around there. So within process reputation, we have the reputation feeds, social assurance, and then we have a third one, which is the blacklist or whitelist. So you can, as a user, you can come in and manually say whether you want to process on your blacklist or whitelist, and that will also help us to classify and let you know whether that behavior that we've seen is good or bad. Okay, then I talked about the guest integrity checks, and then the other one is we have a behavior analysis. So we've modeled several processes, and we'll go ahead and tell you based on that process, the specific CLI that's being executed, and the network connections associated with that CLI, whether that's seen as an expected behavior for that process or whether it's anomalous. And we can appropriately flag and propagate that information up to you so that you can make the decision. So we'll present you with this information when you're ready to transition from discover to protected mode. And you'll basically say that, okay, yes, everything looks good. Let's move into protected mode.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How granular does that application protection go? Because I may not have a one-to-one mapping between an application and a VM. So for instance, I could have a web server with multiple websites on it.
Good question.
Or I could have a database with multiple instances on it.
Yeah.
How far does it go?
No, good question. So, and we'll see this a little bit more in the demo, but basically we have the scope, which is your application, okay? That scope is comprised of services. And so like the DB server, for example, is a service. Now that DB server, so this kind of manifest of known good behavior that we create is done at the service level. So the expectation is that if that DB server consists of multiple virtual machines, they should all be behaving the same. They should all have the same set of known good behaviors.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it covers the protection of it, but.
Well, I think in that sense, then you could make multiple services also. But right now, right, we've put the level of granularity for the manifest at that service level, because again, the assumption is, or kind of the policy that we've set forward, is that that service should be homogeneous.
Okay.
All right, so in protected mode, right, we'll use the manifest that we created during the discovery phase, and we'll detect the deviations from the set of known good behaviors. And as I mentioned, when we see a deviation, it's not just that we're going to throw up an alert every time and say, hey, you need to look at this right away, because some of those may not be alerts that need your attention. So we're going to send those deviations to our app verification cloud, do that same analysis using the process reputation, using the guest integrity, using the behavior analysis to appropriately classify these alerts. So we can, if we see something that's on your blacklist, we can promote that as something that's, hey, that's a severe criticality, and that needs your attention, so that we pull that up into the alerts. If our behavior analysis model has detected that, okay, this is actually something that is a known good, we've seen it elsewhere, it's not an anomalous behavior, we can declassify that alert, drop it down into like a minor or an info event. So again, going into sort of the example of software upgrades, if I've done an update from #1, which was my known good, to #2, which is a deviation or unknown, we can use our things like social assurance and others to say that, okay, well, #2 is actually a known good hash for this process. And we can even go as far as declassifying that to an info event, and go as far as automatically adding that to your allowed behavior. So now you've kind of grown your manifest, you've grown your understanding of your environment, and you've made it easier to detect when the actual bad behavior is happening and to get the appropriate alerts for those bad behaviors. And the final thing is, okay, so we generate these alerts, what do you do with them? So we have a variety of kind of automated responses or manual responses that you can take. The first one is just going to be, what we've talked about so far, which is the alerting, right? Getting that notification, whether it's an event or alert, with the appropriate classification. But then you'll also have the ability to block, right? So if we see this specific behavior, I want AppDefense to automatically block. And that's where we're using our position within the VM itself, within the guest OS, to block that behavior anytime we see it. Or to block it from ever starting, I should say. And then, so that's one option. You can also have that set to manual. For all these policies, you can do it either automatic or manual, where you receive the event or alert, and then you decide to take that action. Then, again, being part of kind of the VMware system and having that integration, we've plugged in with vSphere functions like power off and suspend the VM, or even snapshot. So you can snapshot it and go do some diagnostics on that after. And then within NSX, we've also plugged in to be able to quarantine the VM. So you can automatically isolate that VM from the rest of your data center, and go ahead and do any operations you need there. And again, I'll show you a little bit more during the demo how you can set all those policies. And then, yeah, again, the last key here is just the idea that we're adapting, right? We're not just going to toss up every event, and classify it to you as an alert and lead to that alert fatigue. We're really going to make sure that you're seeing the ones that are relevant to you, and that we're expanding your VM manifest, your set of known behaviors, appropriately over time, so that we do have a good understanding of your environment. Okay, so I want to spend a little bit of time on the architecture, and then I'll hop into the demo. So just looking through kind of the components, right? We've discussed a lot of this already, but just want to take some time to spend on each of it. So you'll have your guest OSs, your guest VMs, which have VM tools installed where the AppDefense module is running, and kind of collecting that behavior and sending it down the pipe. You have the host module baked into vSphere, baked into ESXi, again, delivered as a VIB that gets automatically installed and is running in the ESXi kernel. And that this only shows one vSphere, but there could be multiple. So this, and that's again, right, I want to talk about that sort of protecting the protector again. So that ESXi module is, again, verifying that the appd module on the VM itself is healthy, has not been corrupted. It's also verifying that the behaviors that are being reported within the guest OS by VM tools, by our module within VM tools, match up with what our module within ESXi is seeing, so that we can tell you any differences we see there. So that data is sent to our appliance. That's just an OVA deployed within your vCenter. That appliance has a database itself for this behavior metadata. And that appliance is used, so when you have vSphere Platinum, you enable that license, we'll present you a plugin UI within vCenter. And I'll show you that during the demo. But this plugin UI is really targeted at the VI admins, giving them the visibility to understand what's going on in their data center, what processes are running across the data center, across those protected VMs, and to be able to use that information to work with the security team to take the appropriate actions and responses. The appliance is also sending up that metadata to the cloud, to our AppDefense service, what we also call our SaaS manager. And that's kind of the UI that I'll walk you through a little bit there. That also has a database where the app verification cloud that I talked about is going through that data, doing the appropriate classifications on all of your events and alerts, and generating those classifications that you can appropriately act on the events happening within your data center. Okay, so with that, Any other questions? I'm going to hop into the demo now.
On the reputation feed, is it a single source that you guys maintain, or do you work with other industry partners?
Right. So yeah. So first there's multiple components to it, but the feed specifically, yes, there are multiple partners that we work with. Yeah.